Entertainment, great food, a free raffle, kid zones, and face painting. Walking or biking is encouraged. Michelle and Natasha will be there with some fun giveaway items and other cool things TBD. So make sure to say hi if you stop by. The following weekend, May 6th, we have the annual compost giveaway at Memorial Park along Carmel Avenue from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Residents can take home up to 4 bags of organic certified compost that's made from your residential food scraps and yard waste. Note that this event is first come, first served while supplies last. So we cannot guarantee that if you come at 10:55, there will be compost left. So make sure to get there early. Pass it to Michelle.
So another upcoming event we have is the citywide garage sale. That will be on May 13th, and it takes place from 9 to noon. There will be garage sales held throughout the city, and we will be creating a map of all the garage sales with listings and short descriptions. So you can go shopping all around the city for reused items, and we encourage everyone to attend.
Great. At this time, I'd like to pass it to Natasha virtually for an update on the street tree management plan.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I'll be providing a brief status update on the street tree management plan, or we shorthand it to STMP. But we are somewhere in between 85 to 90% complete with the street tree inventory and anticipating completion sometime in May. Additionally, we have the request for proposals, or the RFP, for consulting services for the development of the plan itself, and that RFP will be live until Friday, April 28th. Or excuse me, Friday, April 20th, yes, correct. Well, ultimately, the STMP will be a resource to guide street tree-related decision-making to increase the planting of street trees and improve the health of Albany's tree canopy. And this plan will contain information regarding industry best practices in addition to Albany-specific guidelines. So species considerations with evolving climate and any surface infrastructure considerations, among other things.
Thank you, Natasha. Okay, I do see that we have a member of the public with their hand raised, but we'll conclude the announcements from staff and committee members, and then we'll open it up to public comment. Yes?
I didn't get the time for the compost giveaway.
It is 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., but while supplies last. So it'll start at 8 a.m., could end at 8:15. It couldn't end at 8:15. It would probably, I think the earliest it could end is maybe around the 9s, but I can't guarantee anything. Okay, Michelle?
Okay, another update on the multifamily electric vehicle charging pilot project. I've gotten really good at saying that name. So this project has been moving along very well. We now have 2 of our 3 buildings, our pilot buildings, with installed and inspected chargers. So we're very excited about that. They're live, they're working, and the 3rd one is in the process of doing the installation and has their permit and everything. And so at this point, we're kind of doing the last finishing pieces. I've been doing some outreach with the tenants and sending them information about electric vehicles and incentives available, working with the building owners to make sure they know how to work their new equipment, how to communicate with their tenants about it, how the payment system works, and kind of finishing up our internal grant logistics with them. And then I'll also be doing kind of final interviews with each of the participants together, kind of all the information I can before completing a report on the pilot project, which will be coming to this commission sometime soon.
Great.
And then the next announcement is also mine. We mentioned a few months ago that there was a compost hub as part of a project with the Giltract Farm that was upcoming, and that will be launching this Sunday. That will be at the Giltract Farm's birthday event. That's birth spelled like earth with a B. That will be on Sunday from 11 to 4. We will be launching the compost hub, although it will be walk-up only for Sunday, and then it'll be a drive-up hub on Sundays open after that. And Natasha and I will also be at that event helping out with a compost-themed planting activity. So we encourage you all to come check it out.
And I think that's a great one. If you go to the compost giveaway and aren't able to secure bags of compost to take home, the hub will be open every Sunday for you to take compost anytime you'd like. At this point, we can turn it over to the committee if anyone has announcements they would like to make. Chair Mohammed, if you would like to call on individuals, maybe folks can raise their hand.
Yep, okay.
This is Albany adjacent, but this weekend there will be the Berkeley Earth Day Festival. If I remember right, it's 11 to 4-ish down at near the marina. I should have brought info online. I'm sure you can find it on the web, but I know East Bay Community Energy is going to have a booth there. So come on down.
All right. Does anybody else have anything to add?
Okay,
Then I guess we can move on to public comment.
yes. We have one member of the public with their hand raised. Aaron? Aaron Frank?
Hi, can you hear me and see me?
Yes.
Hi, so my name's Aaron Frank. Should I turn on my video or?
I don't believe you're able to. We
Okay.
can hear
Okay.
you.
Hi, everybody. My name's Aaron Frank. I wanted to bring an issue to your attention. I know you guys are just hearing about the street tree management plan, but there has been an acceleration of removal of very large trees in Albany in the last year or so. And it really goes beyond what is normal. And I think that I have some slides here. So this is just the street, within 150 feet of my house. This is Washington Avenue. And these are just some of the trees. So this is the before shot. This is a Google from, 2020. And then after, you can see in the last year or so, there have been 6 street trees. These are large canopy trees, probably 70 years on average, that have now been removed. And this is just a small snapshot of what's happened. And there's been an acceleration. So you can see now, this is recently, those same trees are now gone. If you'll advance, I'll just take you through just the specifics. Here are 2 trees before. You can see there's really no problems with the sidewalks after. Okay, next. Again, canopy trees here before and after. These all disappeared in the last couple of months. Next, please. So before, and by the way, if you look at this tree, you can barely see, but the public notice is on that tree. You see 2 faint pieces of tape where you can't even see the notice. That was the public notice. That's before. This just came down a couple of months ago after. And there's 2 more that weren't even on that map that just came down, 7 and 8, within 150 feet of my house. There you go. Before, and these came down in the last couple of weeks after. Many of these are coming, and I just wanted to point out that the climate action plan, the adaptation plan, goal number 1 was an increase of urban tree canopy in the landscaped area. The Park and Recs Commission that hears these removals isn't really aware of this. They don't seem to be taking into consideration the climate component of what's going on there. And I wanted to bring it to your attention because obviously street trees and urban canopy is one of the most effective ways to offset the urban heat island effect, along with all the other benefits of large
Aaron?
trees. Yes.
Aaron, your 3 minutes is up.
Okay, I just wanted to say, I've sent you an email by public comment. I just would like to invite this committee to take this issue on. and to please ask the city to halt any non-emergency removals until we've been able to actually have public comment and public interaction for the master street tree plan, that there's some environmental review about that.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more public commenter with their hand raised. Lucinda? Lucinda, you're on mute.
Yes, a couple of things. First, Aaron, I want to thank you for bringing that to the attention of the committee. I don't know the circumstances around the tree removal, but I think it's something that definitely needs to be looked at. And I think for me, this raised a bigger and overarching, what I see as problem with the climate action and adaptation plan not being considered by many other actions that the city takes. And I think that is some work needs to be done there. Every decision that our city makes needs to be made with an eye to the climate action and adaptation plan. Instead, it seems like departments are acting separately, and I would like to see that change. It has come up just recently. There was funding for, this is just a small example, the city of Albany provided funding for an event that is coming up. I just spoke with the organizer. There were no sustainability or none or very little sustainability considerations taken into account in planning the event. That's just a small example. Lastly, I want to just say a big thank you to Michelle. It's really great news to hear that those two buildings have had the charging stations installed. I know that's been in the works for a long time, and it's really great to see that coming to some completion. I'm looking forward to hearing the report. Thank you.
Okay, next public comment is from Jeremiah Pinguello. Jeremiah?
Oh, thank you for the introduction. I was just wondering when the city hall and city buildings were gonna get solar panels installed. We're living in the year 2023 now, and I think solar panels were becoming mainstream almost 25 years ago, almost a quarter of a century. So I was just wondering when our public buildings are gonna be updated to this, new future we live in, to reduce, emissions or whatever, kind of be self-sustained. So that's all I wanted to mention, is just when on the plan is a city hall and the community center supposed to have solar panels installed on the rooftop. Thank you.
Okay, those are all our public comments.
Okay, and I believe we can move to discussion of announcements.
Is there a protocol for following up on the questions that were asked? What's the process for us learning more about those questions? Because a lot of it's just stuff that I suspect staff would know.
I can answer the solar panel question. Off the top of my head, we, in partnership with EBCE, are pursuing the Phase 3 solar and storage project on city facilities. A resolution was adopted by council in November of last year, and I believe last I heard Phase 3 kicks off sometime late spring, early summer. As a part of that project, solar panels might be installed. I know we have some existing solar panels on city facilities. I'm not sure what the capacity of those is currently, but that would be also included in the analysis. As far as the street tree comments, we are hoping to address concerns that were brought up during the public comments in development of the street tree management plan. And there will be an extensive public engagement process as a part of that planning process. It's already kicked off somewhat. And so we're definitely eager to learn more about what the community thinks about our street tree management practices, and also to include those comments in future planning policies. Anything else?
That's helpful. It looked like, are we allowed to discuss this, or is this just, it's not agenda?
We're technically not supposed to discuss anything that comes up in announcements. I think, as a reminder for members of the public, public comments for items not on the agenda are supposed to happen during the general public comment period, and announcements, it's just supposed to be questions and comments on announcements. If there is anything the committee wants to discuss further, there can be a request for a future agenda item at the end of the meeting.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other discussion or comments anyone would like to make? And I believe we move on to the next item, which is presentation.
So that's me. One moment. See if it catches up. Okay, looks like it's working. Okay, thanks for your patience, everyone. So I'll be giving a presentation on our Climate Action and Adaptation Plan Key Performance Indicators, or KPIs. This is how we track our progress on the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan every year. And I'll be going through a whole variety of indicators. I won't be covering them all since there are quite a few, but I'll be giving you all the highlights. And I'll start off with the sort of big picture emissions breakdown. So our most recent citywide emissions inventory is for 2021. We don't have all of the data yet for 2022. But as you can see, our total emissions for the city in 2021 was about 50,200 metric tons of carbon dioxide. And that comes out to about 2.44 tons per person. And in our pie graph here, you can see that the majority of the emissions are coming from transportation. That makes up 48%. And then just very close behind that is natural gas emissions. And it's broken up here by residential and non-residential, but you can see that it makes up over 40% of the rest of the pie. And then we have little bits and pieces. Residential and non-residential electricity are both about 1%, very small piece because our electricity here is mostly carbon-free, as we've spoken about before. We have off-road emissions, which are from things like construction mainly, and then also waste emissions. That's things like methane coming from landfills. And then you can also see on the right here, in this graph comparing 2020 and 2021, it shows you the changes we've seen in the last year. Obviously 2020 was a little bit unusual, as you probably remember. And the biggest difference is that the transportation emissions in 2020 were extremely low, as people were staying at home due to, the COVID-19 pandemic. And so that has risen in 2021, although it's still lower than it was previously, which we'll get into in more detail. So that's the big shift, and that's why our emissions did raise overall from between 2020 and 2021. But if you look at the other categories, you'll see that there were actually small decreases in the rest of them. So that's overall a positive. There we go. And also looking at a very big picture, this is a chart of our emissions goals from our Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. We set a goal of reaching 75% of our 2004 emissions by 2020, and then 0% by 2045. And as you can see in the orange line here, we are actually ahead of our targets. Obviously, we had this major dip in 2020, as we've spoken about, but you can see that if you kind of ignore that odd aberration, it's following a pretty similar trend line in 2021. It looks like we're kind of getting back into the swing that we were in beforehand, and that's actually a pretty speedy decline in the scheme of things. Obviously, faster declines are always better when we're talking about our emissions, but it looks like we're doing fairly well on the track that we set ourselves. This is another graph of the last, I don't even know how many years, since 2005, and it's showing by source here. And the big things to note are mainly the impact of our switch over to EBCE electricity with very low, in some cases, zero carbon emissions from the electricity. So that's the purple sections in this graph. And you can see that they make up a reasonable chunk in 2005, 2010, and then starting in 2017, and especially in 2019, you can see it just shrinks to almost nothing. So our electricity emissions are barely anything anymore. And then you can also see that there's a steady decline in that orange bar, which is the transportation emissions. I also want to take a moment while we're talking about overall inventories to discuss the consumption-based emissions inventory. This is something that instead of calculating the emissions that are actually coming out of Albany buildings and cars, it's looking at a life cycle impact, the kind of embodied emissions that are in the things that we consume every day. And so you can see in this chart, it has a much wider range of categories, things like air travel and the food that we eat, like meat, for instance, and all of the embodied emissions that come from the production of meat. A whole range of things. And when we look at it this way, the inventory is quite a bit larger. It's 300,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide, and that was in 2015. We don't update this inventory regularly. That's very difficult to do, and we actually didn't create this inventory. This was created by some folks at UC Berkeley. So we can't track it in the same way that we track the other one, but it is important to kind of keep this in mind as we think about our overall impact. So now I'll break these categories down a little bit more, and I'll start off with buildings. This is just for the residential electricity and gas. We don't actually have direct data on the non-residential electricity and gas due to some privacy rules. So we're just focused on those two here. And you can see that there are general declines over time. However, the electricity did spike in 2020. That's probably due to people spending a lot more time at home. Again, because it's just residential, we can't see a similar movement in commercial, so we don't know what that might look like. But this is probably due to the pandemic. But we do see a very important drop in residential gas use starting in 2019 and apparently speeding up in the last few years. That 2022 number is a bit faded because it's still preliminary, so I'll come back and give you an update on this next year. It's also hard to say how much of this is related to electrification versus weather. At this point, weather is probably the majority of it, but it's a little bit difficult to parse at this point. But that's part of the reason that it's really helpful to look at some of the more specific data we have. Right. Okay. All right, well, this will work. So the more specific data we have on a city level that gets into permits, and this is really more sensitive. So I think I showed you this chart back in January when we were talking about our heat pump rebate program. As you can see, there's been a massive increase in the number of heat pumps that are installed as a comparison to furnaces. So we actually reached over 50% of our new HVAC systems being heat pumps last year. And so, that's still a relatively small number in the scheme of the entire city, but it's a very, very promising trend. This is a great example of that. We also have 2,000 kilowatts of solar that have been installed in the city since 2017, 11 all-electric units that were built in 2022, and of course our all-electric ordinance, which was passed late last year. That's for new construction and major remodels. So some major movements, at least on our city level, towards electrification. So we'll see over time that has an impact on our gas usage. In terms of transportation, I think as you saw there, there's been, obviously this huge dip in 2020, but then in 2021, it rose back to that sort of previous trend line, as I said. It's up, but in the larger scheme of things, we're still trending downwards. And what this chart shows is a comparison of the sources, the reasons why our overall transportation emissions are declining. The blue line here is our vehicle miles traveled, the total number of miles that are traveled in cars. As you can see, declining very well. And then in orange, we have the emissions per mile. It's called the emissions factor. And so this is also declining a little bit slower, but at a steady pace. And this is because the cars we drive are becoming more and more gas efficient, and also because there's an adoption of electric vehicles at an ever-growing rate. So even though we still are driving cars, we're doing less and less emissions per mile driven. I'll also just note that a big part of the reason that we see a reduction in VMT is, we've been working very hard to expand our bicycle facilities in the city to improve pedestrian safety and really encourage people to do active transit rather than driving. We also, for instance, passed a dockless mobility ordinance last year that allows us to have shared scooter services around the city, and just trying to provide more and more options for people to get out of their vehicles. So just examples, again, of city-level things we're doing to try to make these changes happen. So I was speaking about EVs a moment ago. I'll get into that in a little more detail here. So these charts compare Albany in blue, Alameda County in orange, and California in gray. And you can see that we're leading the way here with the EVs as a percent of vehicle population. Again, we have some preliminary numbers at 2022 levels, but it looks like we've reached about 8% of our total vehicle population being electric at this point, which is great. In terms of the percent of purchases, again, I'm not super sure exactly what this looks like in 2022 since the vehicle market has been a little odd for the last year or two. But it looks like we're somewhere between 20 and 25% of purchases, which is, again, a pretty high number when you look at these things, and it's been rising fairly quickly. Now to turn our eyes towards waste. So on the left here, you can see the citywide waste figures. This is in tons taken per year. The black line there is the landfill, which has been declining for a few years now, which is great news. And then we see the compost or organics in green and recycling in blue. Recycling has been rising a little bit for the last few years. These ones kind of jump around, and they kind of have more to do with economics in some ways than other things, but we have a pretty steady and healthy diversion rate. As you can see on the right here, the waste mix, you can see that our diversion rate has been increasing slightly. It's up. So we're only getting rid of 48% of our products to the landfill now rather than 49. So it's a slight increase, but it's good. And organics is going up a little bit from 27 to 28. And another really great figure here is that our pounds of waste per person per day is just 1.15. And that's actually a record low for Albany. So that's a really, really great number, all things considered. Of course, lots of room to grow there, as always. And then a just quick look at municipal emissions. So this chart on the left here shows electricity in the orange one and natural gas in the blue. You can see the electricity emissions go down to 0. That's because Albany switched to Renewable 100 for all municipal accounts. And we actually see a slight decline in gas emissions, although it's a little hard to tell here. And then we're also seeing improvements in municipal waste at the same time. It's a little hard to make out perhaps, but our landfill has been decreasing and overall waste has been decreasing for the last few years as well. And we've also seen a pretty significant increase in recycling rates. It's jumped from 11% in 2019 and now it's up to 17%. So some pretty big swings there. And then finally, I just want to talk about our progress on the CAP actions themselves. We included with the report for this a summary of all of those actions. You can look through in detail if you're interested, but to give you an overall look of the actions that we have in the CAP, 5 of them have been completed, 27 are in progress, which is over half of them, I believe, 10 ongoing, and then only 11 have been not started or paused for some reason, and then there are also 2 that are no longer applicable for various reasons. And here I just have a few highlights. So this year, or last year, as part of our housing element, we amended the zoning ordinance to require higher density development where appropriate. That was 1.1.8. That's complete. We're in progress on the electric vehicle action plan, in particular working on the EV pilot that I spoke about a few moments ago. We completed our regulations requiring all new electric construction. Completed encouraging opt-ups to Renewable 100. That's now the automatic enrollment for all accounts in Albany. On an ongoing basis, we're promoting and facilitating sharing, repair, reuse economy, for instance, with the citywide garage sale, again, that I spoke about just moments ago. And also, like you heard about this evening, we're working on the urban forestry plan, which is being called the street tree management plan. So these are just a few highlights, but the point is that the CAP actions, almost all of them are being worked on. Several have been completed. So we're really just going at all levels, working on all these different parts of the plan, and a lot has been done just in the last few years. And finally, outside Albany, there's also been a lot of really important work that's helped improve our figures and our indicators here. On a regional level recently, the Air District made a ruling that will phase out the sale of gas appliances by 2029. There's a California policy from a few years ago that all light-duty vehicles sold in 2035 must be EVs. And then, of course, there have been massive bills on the federal level, the Infrastructure Bill and the Inflation Reduction Act, that are going to make a huge difference around the country, including in Albany. So a few general conclusions here. Some of the positive trends that we saw before COVID seem to be resuming. After kind of a wonky year, it seems like we've kind of gotten back on track. As usual, transportation and building make up the largest share of emissions, and we focus a lot on those. And our city policies and programs have made measurable impacts. We can track that and see it, and it's in our emissions inventory side of things and also in a lot of other metrics that we have in our KPIs and in our CAP goals. And like I said, most CAP goals are either in progress or complete. So lots of good things to see from this report, lots of data, and I'm happy to answer all of your questions.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, I had 2 questions. First, I'll be interested to hear more about the EV action plan and I guess, yeah, what that entails.
Yeah. So this plan, there was a subcommittee, which I think still exists. Maybe it's changed names a few times, so it's a little tricky to track. But staff and a few members of the committee worked together to create a plan outline. It wasn't fully produced in the way the climate action plan was, but it had a variety of priorities and action ideas. And the staff and the committee determined together that it made the most sense to not formally bring it to council, but instead to start working on one of the higher priority items, which was the multifamily EV charging pilot. And then also just, continue developing the plan and working on items as they came up. Or as, we had capacity to work on them.
And I think Eric is one of the original members that has now transitioned to the new cycle of the subcommittee.
Emissions transportation.
Yes, yes.
Right. So I'm sure we'll hear more in our subcommittee briefing about that, but feel free, Eric, if you have anything to add on the plan.
Yeah, no, I agree that we had done, like you said, an outline. It wasn't a plan that was actually released for, like as a formal plan, but there was an outline. And I've shared that with the current subcommittee members, Troy and Dan. So we're getting started on kind of reformulating and working on that. But yeah, I agree, that sort of was our working method, was create a prioritized list and start picking off the priority items to work on, is part of the work plan that we already have. And so I agree, that's how we've been operating. I think my add-on to that would be that I think that it's such an important part of our emissions package that it, at some point, probably would be worth, getting some outside help to formulate a real plan, a real like overarching strategy that would help us maybe, get some focus on a big picture thing that we could take to city council. But I think it's what you've been doing is effective, and what we've been, doing in subcommittees effective to prioritize things.
I just want to add real quick, I think one thing Michelle and I were chatting about in looking at this is it's amazing how many actions we have in progress. And I think one thing to keep in mind in implementing the climate action and adaptation plan is it's important to be nimble and flexible. Some of the actions that were written the way they were in 2019 no longer apply because things have progressed beyond that, or we've learned new things. So I think that the EV action plan is a good example of one where the CAP said one thing and then we realized we can make a bigger impact by pivoting for a bit, but following the nature of the action. So just want to add that there, that climate action implementation requires some flexibility and creativity. So thanks all for being on that journey with us.
I'm not clear on what emissions go into the transportation. If people in Berkeley are driving through Albany on San Pablo, does that get included?
It's a great question. So the model that we use, it tracks trips that start or end in Albany. And of course, ones that start and end in Albany, although there's fewer of those. But yeah, so any trip that starts or ends in Albany, Albany gets half of the emissions from that, or the miles traveled from that trip. So if there's a trip that goes from Berkeley to Richmond, Albany doesn't get any part of that. Only if it goes from Berkeley to Albany or Albany to Richmond or something like that.
How are they modeling that? Where are the do you know where they get the data for those sorts of trips?
Yeah, great question. So previously, we got it from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which did surveys as well as all kinds of complex data modeling. That has shifted because this year we got access to Google's Environmental Insights Explorer data. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission basically stopped offering that data during COVID. So we've switched over to Google's data, which is based on Google Maps as well as modeling. But it's probably more accurate, at least we think. And so we've adjusted our numbers going back to 2018 based on the Google data.
I did have one, sorry, were you? I did have one related question, a little bit to EVs, although it's looking more at future opportunities. Yeah, it looks like one of our biggest slice of the pie there is transportation, obviously EV adoption, and one part of that is more charging infrastructure, both at home and in the community. And I saw as of I think it was last month, there was a new federal program, the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Discretionary Grant Program, that makes, I guess it's $2.5 billion available for the program over the next 5 years that includes states that can, or cities that can apply for this, or I guess metropolitan areas, and state and local authorities. So I was just interested if this is something that the city had looked at yet or was interested in exploring.
We can definitely look into it.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I've heard about it, but maybe if you could send it to us online, we could look into it in more detail.
Okay, great.
You have a question?
Yeah, had a couple questions. So in the early graph where you showed was it 2020 to 2021, the transportation went up. The 5-year emissions sort of bar graph shows transportation emissions continuing on a downward trend overall. So I'm sure you already looked at that, but it might be useful, especially with the COVID year screwing everything up, to just, maybe put a trend line in or something like that so that we can, see, anyway, it just would
Sorry,
help.
keep going. Just trying to get there for you.
That was just a comment, but I was curious, what happened with gas in 2011 to 2013? There was, on the gas graph, there was a huge drop, 2011 to 2013. Do you know what happened?
Yeah, I have also been wondering about that. I haven't been able to find a super good answer. I did some looking into it last year, and it appears that that showed up throughout the county. I have countywide data, but not wider than that. My best guess is that it's weather related.
Okay.
I think, there were some downward trends maybe related to energy efficiency and other things, and then, yeah, probably just
Warmer
a big
winters?
shift in weather, yeah.
It's hard, I'm having a hard time seeing the vertical access numbers, but it looks like it doesn't go 0 to whatever. Like I can't, my site
Yeah.
isn't good enough to see those. So I don't know if you can tell me what the bottom and top numbers are.
Yeah, on the very bottom, we have, sorry, let me count the zeros here. We have 2 million, and the top is 2.9 million.
Okay.
And that's in
helpful.
therms.
Okay.
Okay. And then on the EVs purchased percentage-wise in Albany and Alameda, where does that data come from?
So that comes from the California Energy Commission. They have a database of vehicle purchases and EV purchases and population. Some of that data, like I said, is preliminary, and some of it's me kind of trying to model things out because we don't have all the pieces yet. But yeah, that's the source.
And so it means that if Albany was 20%, I can't remember the exact number, that means that of all vehicles purchased in Albany, 20% of them were EVs?
Yeah, in
That
the
year.
given year, yeah.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Very helpful overview though.
Yeah, that was great. All right, one last small question on that last piece. Is that new vehicle sales? Or,
Yes, it's new vehicle sales.
Okay.
I don't think they track used. Don't think so.
gotcha. Okay, great, thanks.
If there are no other questions, I believe we can move on to public comment.
Yes. If you would like to speak to this item, please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom. All right, our first public commenter is Rachel Dunton. Rachel?
Hello, sorry, I have another question about the transportation. I assume that it tracks all vehicles, whether they're like cars that people are driving or like big trucks for, the Target and whatnot.
We can answer your question if you're finished with your full public comment.
Oh,
you-
yeah, that was it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, it covers all vehicles, including trucks and, big rigs and all that kind of stuff.
Great. Our next public commenter is Jeremiah Penguelo. Jeremiah?
Hi, thanks. Two questions. One is there any data for all the construction that goes on in Albany, like what's happening, for example, on Marin and Masonic? There's all the, there's all the East Bay mud trucks, there's all the tractors and these big, dump truck things, and those are diesel. They're probably even unregulated for smog. Is there any data on all the construction vehicles that the city hires to do jobs? And then also the next question was, 510-526-3466. And then also the other question is, what is that restriction on the commercial data for electricity use? I know you mentioned that there was some sort of privacy law or some sort of restriction, but I think it's important for the city to know what is going on with the commercial businesses on Solano, because they probably use a lot of electricity. It would just be nice to find some sort of way to get that data. Thank you. You too.
I think we're going to collect questions and then answer them all after. Okay, next public commenter is Nick Peterson. Nick?
Yeah, thank you very much. Very good report. Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate seeing that. So one thing I'm a little concerned about is that the latest reports that have come in from the UN group for monitoring, the IPCC, are really alarming, and our climate action adaptation plan is actually a bit behind the times, as is California overall. So it'd be nice if we could sort of accelerate some of these issues. And the point I'm making on that is we shouldn't sit back on our laurels and think we've got things solved. I'm really pleased to see that the trends are trending down like they are. I think a lot of that may have been impacted by COVID, as Michelle explained, in the reduction in people just using vehicles to drive around. But for example, I think we saw, it's good to see that 50% of HVAC installs are now heat pump. But again, that only means 11, I think Michelle said, in the whole year. So I was kind of looking, I think it'd be good, in addition to just looking at trends, is to develop some milestones for what we really need to accomplish in the city. For example, if there's 7,000 households in Albany, and half of those, or roughly 3,500, are in owner-occupied homes or condos, that would mean that in order to meet our goals by 2035, the 70% reduction, something like 4 to 6 homes per week need to be totally converted to electric only, not just 11 units per year. So I'm wondering if it would be good to sort of develop some of these metrics of what needs to be happening on kind of an idealized basis, so we can get our hands more wrapped around, what policies need to go into place to motivate people more. I think we're going to have to get more aggressive policies, and I'm going to argue for that later. Thank you very much.
Okay, next public speaker is Lucinda Young. Lucinda?
Yes, thank you. I share some of the same concerns that were expressed by the earlier speaker, Nick Peterson. I recently attended Al Gore's climate reality training, which some of the committee members may have attended. If you haven't, I'd strongly recommend it. But I did hear John Podesta, who's the senior advisor to President Biden on clean energy. He spoke about the UN IPCC report that just came out recently. And his words were that we have a very short time to avoid catastrophe. And I don't use catastrophe lightly, that is his language, and that the speed and the scale is of the essence. We can still avoid the worst consequences, but we have a very short time to do it. So I'm happy to see some progress, but I'm deeply concerned that we are not moving fast enough. Another comment that I have is this particular training that I went through was on the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. And the amount of funding that is going to be coming out for local governments is incredible. There was a recommendation that our local officials our local representatives and officials, including, I think, this climate committee, join an organization, and some of you may already be part of it, but it is it's through Electrify America, and it's Local Government Leaders for Electrification Coalition, and the purpose of it is to keep our local officials up to date on all the new grant programs and incentives that are going to be rolling out in the next year and later this fall and at the beginning of the year. And I was happy to see that 3 of our city council members are already on that, have already signed up and are on that organization, but I'd really encourage the other members of our climate committee and our staff to join as well. Thank you.
Okay, our next public speaker is David Wemmer. David?
Hi, good evening. I'll make it short and sweet. I just totally support the previous speakers, Nick and Lucinda. And I think I agree. I'm feeling the urgency more and more every day. And so the more we can be proactive and, you know, and set ourselves up for success would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, we have no other members of the public with their hand raised, and I think Michelle will answer some of the questions.
Yes, so the first one I have here is regarding data related to construction in Albany, all the work we've been doing lately. The answer is we do have that included on our overall emissions. It's pretty heavily modeled. It's really just based on like population and jobs numbers. So it's not really getting into the specifics of like the work that we're doing on Marin, for example, but it is in there. It's under the off-road section, which makes up, I think, 4% of our total overall emissions. The second question was about the restriction on commercial gas and electricity data. That is related to something called the 1515 rule. I can see that member Lieberman knows all about this. Basically, the way it works is that if you're looking at a pool of data, such as the city of Albany, and the number of users is under 15, or if one user or one account makes up over 15% of the total, then the utility is not allowed to give the city that data, with a concern that, you know, with one user that's using so much, you're basically getting access to what's essentially their private data. It's just a concern that it's too specific, basically. So that's the reason that we haven't been able to get that commercial data. It really just happens in communities where there's not that many accounts, where communities are pretty small. So that's the issue here in Albany. And then there was a question about the number of heat pumps. The number 11 there was the number of all electric buildings. I think the number of heat pumps is something around 70 for last year, just to clarify that. And then also just clarify that one of the commenters mentioned Electrify America, and that 3 council members had signed up to be part of that group. That is only available for council members, not for committee members or staff, just to clarify as well. Any questions that I missed there?
I think that group might be called Rewiring America. Is that the one?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I'm thinking of something else.
All good.
And I think they might have changed their name recently, but thank you for the clarification there. Yes.
All right, I guess we can move on to discussion of the presentation.
Maybe it's a question, but is the data, like, is that available as a report? You know, is there?
Yeah.
Look at what you presented. I mean, yeah, sorry.
Sorry. Huh? Sorry. One of our attachments with this item was a spreadsheet.
Okay. Cool.
And that's the report version.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we also put each year the report on our website. If you go to the City of Albany webpage, and then you hover over Departments, Sustainability, Climate Action, and Adaptation Planning, there should be a link on that main page so that anyone could access the report. We'll probably have it up in the next week or so.
Thank you.
And just as a reminder for the committee, this report is typically provided annually around April.
Any other comments? I'd just like to say thank you for the presentation. There was a lot of data, and I could see you put a lot of work into it.
Thank you. Yes. I was swimming in data for a few weeks there, so appreciate it.
Data and charts.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, nice job.
I believe we can move on to the next item, which is discussion and possible action of other things, yeah. And then we can move on to 6-1.
Yeah, 6-1 is subcommittee updates. We typically put this at the bottom of the agenda, but we did cancel the March meeting because while we were actively working on implementing projects and gathering data and moving forward sustainability programs in the city, we didn't have anything we needed from the committee. So we thought we would cancel the meeting to not make you all come here so we could just provide updates to you and give you the opportunity to meet with your subcommittees so that you could provide updates to each other during this meeting. So we have, it's only 8 p.m. right now. As a reminder, our meeting goes till 9 unless it's extended. We have a pretty substantial amount of time for subcommittees to provide a report out and for committees, the committee as a whole, to discuss progress. And as a reminder, with subcommittees, subcommittees are allowed to meet under a quorum and discuss ideas, proposals, but subcommittees aren't on their own allowed to take any action unless the committee as a whole agrees to move forward on a proposed policy or program or action. So now is the opportunity that if you discuss anything in your subcommittees to get a pulse from your committee as a whole, if it's something the committee wants to continue pursuing. I listed this in alphabetical order, but if anyone wants to go out of order, that's fine. But alphabetically, the first is the new Environmental Justice Subcommittee.
Hello. Okay. So there is no Wi-Fi, and I had notes, so I'm just going to speak from the head. I did have notes, though, but the chair and I don't want to put you on the spot, but she did indicate interest in joining. I don't know, is that still?
Yes.
I know, okay, so we talked about it a little bit, and we're thinking to work with, there's an environmental justice club at the high school. I don't know if that's the exact name, because I can't reference my notes, but there is an environmental justice club, and I think it's working with UC Berkeley, if I'm not mistaken. And so that could potentially be a place to collaborate, but we know we want to start some kind of project and initiative that focuses on environmental justice and building a more inclusive and equitable environmental movement in Albany and the broader community. So that's the big thing. And so adding the chair to that subcommittee is the update for now, and we'll continue to discuss that since it is newly formed. There's nothing like huge project updates or anything yet.
Sounds great. Thank you. Next on the list was the Home Electrification Mandate Subcommittee, and this subcommittee currently has 0 members, but potentially has 1, and I'll leave it there in case this potential member would like to speak.
Oh, I volunteered.
Okay, great.
Anybody else wants to volunteer? Happy to have you join me. Last week, I requested data from the people who were on this subcommittee in the previous council, or committee, excuse me. And Nick Peterson was kind enough to send me a boatload of data, which I'm just beginning to look at. There's a whole lot to absorb because clearly he and I think his last name is Mikey, the new committee member? Is
Mickey.
that- Mickey. The two of them clearly did a lot of work, so I'm starting to get up to speed on that, and I'm happy to share that with anyone who likes to join me. There's some action at the PUC that is relevant to this also, and I'll talk about that under future agenda items, number 7, when we get down there.
Great, thank you. The next one we have is the Student Outreach and Engagement Subcommittee.
I can take that one as well. So yeah, no Wi-Fi, no notes, but we did meet before we had spring break, so we met before then. No huge updates. We're continuing to write a resolution that's later going to be looked over by board members from the school board of AUSD. And so we're working closely with them to kind of have a written out resolution. And our hopes, is still to present that to the Board of Education. And it would cover, it also crosses over with the Environmental Justice Subcommittee, which is interesting because a large portion of that is like, we want students in the district to graduate with an understanding not only of like what climate change is and what environmental issues are, but also like the environmental disparities and like the bigger picture. So they could, the big purpose is we want them to understand and to become, their own climate advocates once they leave AUSD, and to just use this as like the building ground for their education. So we are still working on writing that. And it is a process, obviously, because we want to present something that's been thoroughly worked on and looked over by many different people, but we are working on it. And if you have anything to add, feel free to add.
I would also like to say that, like, when we finish the proposal, I would also like the committee to revise over it, and if they wanted to add anything, they could join the subcommittee and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I was just going to say, I think that might be the next best move so that it's a full committee recommendation.
Yeah, we had intentions once we did to send it, and to have everyone have an opportunity to look over it and leave comments and feedback and all of that before we actually send it in.
Awesome. Do you know the timeline for?
I would say we're hoping to finish it up in the next, very soon.
Okay.
Week or two. I think we should have a really thorough draft done.
So maybe we plan for the May meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll be ready before then, I think.
Okay. Great. Thank you. And then next I had the Zero Emission Transportation Subcommittee. You chose the subcommittee with a Z, so. Okay, I'm pulling up your slides. Okay, whoever would like to can just tell me next slide whenever you're ready.
You want to go for it?
Okay. So we have met twice. So it's Troy, Dan, and myself. I was on the Zero Emission Transportation Subcommittee before, so I was the first meeting we kind of got oriented, went over the outline and that we had come up with before and worked on through, and I updated them on some of the projects we had done before. And took the opportunity to kind of, do a little bit of a, here's where we were before, here's what we, thought, but it's clean slate, new minds. So we went away for a few weeks, and then we met again a second time, and came up with more of a prioritized list of what this committee wants to go forward with. So if you want to go to the next slide. So this is, we went through all the different topics, and this is our topics of interest, and then we prioritize them. So the numbering is significant as far as prioritization. We want to facilitate the use of public transportation. We want to increase the accessibility and number of public charging for EVs. Want to address the municipal vehicles fleet. And then 4, 5, and 6, you'll see are sort of on the list, but intentionally lower priority because they're either, sort of more problematic, longer term, more different things involved. So anyway, it was kind of a mix of what our interest was and what we can get to and action on. So go to the next one. So we kind of, took the first two and then started breaking them down into what's the, what do we see as the actual problem and what are some of the things we want to start working on. So this is, Dan did a nice job of kind of formulating it in terms of a problem statement. There's 2 BART stations on either side of Albany, and it's, our feeling is that we could facilitate better use of those for to and from Albany with some sort of transportation between them and accessing Solano, San Pablo, Marin Avenues, University Village, and something like a shuttle van or something like that would be a good way to facilitate that. So anyway, currently there's a bus line, but there's, walking involved and stuff like that. So go to the next slide. So we started brainstorming possible solutions, and I kind of, sort of said what had been effective, like with the charging station pilot program, was we got to the point of saying, here's what we want to work on. We fleshed it out a bit, worked with you, Michelle, and then we got the committee support for it, took it to city council and got it funded. So that was kind of like it was nice to have a success story to kind of build off of, what's the model for how this works. So possible solutions, we'd like to investigate our shuttle van to support the use of BART. We want to connect the 2 BART stations. We need to understand the options and the problem and work with partners on solutions. I had a meeting with the chair of the Transportation Commission before the last meeting. I think I mentioned that. So we'd like to find a way to work more closely with them. We realize that they probably have expertise and interest in this area, so we want to formally have our committees be able to work together. And we talked about that last time, about having staff help us coordinate on that. So, all right. And then the second item was public charging for EVs, where we want to raise the, I should start the problem statement. We only have a few public EV charging units within Albany city limits, and there's lots of, it's a densely populated area, and we have a good commercial business district, so there's lots of opportunity for EV. Dan, I know you.
Yeah, I just wanted to update, after I wrote that slide, I realized there is a charge point under the freeway at Buchanan that has 4 units. I believe that and the one behind Vosper are the only operating public chargers in Albany at this time.
So we felt that this is a good opportunity because not only is it, actually providing a service, but it's also a very visible way of showing the community that EVs are, useful, can be used. The charging is one of those things that always comes up as an obstacle for people. So next slide. So increasing the visibility and access within Albany. And so we started brainstorming on where would we want charging stations put in. There's a list of municipal locations, parks, bulb, commercial areas. We started thinking about partners. Tesla has a big charging station over on the Ranch 99 parking area. So that, it's a great model. They're obviously interested. Maybe they'd be interested in going to Target or someplace else in Albany for that. EBCE, Ride, Drive Clean are other partners potentially. And we just thought we'd throw in that, our Spark Fellow program has always been very helpful in researching things. So if there's funding or partners research that, that's an opportunity. And then municipal vehicles, it's a thing that's come up before for sure. It's been on the city roadmap for a long time, is, addressing the city fleet, including police cars. So we'd like to get that back on the table, and just it has to start with a plan. Excuse me, and and we know it's going to take years to implement, but it has to start someplace. So we want to just kickstart that again. And then the city fleet, I think that there's more variety of vehicles now in the EV range, trucks, light vehicles, so I know that Parks looked into this a while ago and kind of determined that the EVs weren't suitable for the kind of work that they do, but I think that maybe it's time for a look at that again. And then sort of our parking lot, EV parking lot, of things we would want to pursue after those first three priorities. Parking management, it's something that was in the climate action plan. It's a tough nut because it's very, political, and there's a lot of public opinion involved, and we realize there's equity issues, and there's a lot involved in that one. So I think that has to be, but again, we'd like to kickstart that at some point. And piggybacking on the idea of the home sale, electrification, there could be something with charging stations involved with that. And then school vehicles, it's probably a low return. There's not that many school vehicles, so. But we kind of felt like that was another visible way to, have the city show support for EVs. You guys want to add anything?
Summary.
So I guess our next step would be refine that into what we're, wanting to work on and bring that back as a proposal to the committee. Hopefully we'll have a chance to talk to the Transportation Commission on the shuttle kind of thing and see if there's some coordination we can do there.
And I guess as a new member and more of a process question, what would be the best way to collaborate with y'all to figure out where on that, you've already started on or have done some efforts and where we could be most helpful?
Yeah, it might be helpful for us to look, we only had a few moments to look at the PowerPoint. Maybe if we look at the PowerPoint, discuss it with people above us and come up with an email response, maybe would be the best move. I do think it is worth asking the whole committee what their priorities are too, just so you don't go too far in one of them without getting a pulse from others on what they think would be a good priority.
That's an excellent PowerPoint. Is it going to be posted on the City of Albany website somewhere?
We can send it out tomorrow.
Okay,
I
thank
can
you.
send it out tomorrow. Yes.
Guess we can move on to questions for any updates.
Yeah, thank you. Questions?
So yeah, I had a question for the Zero Emission Transportation Subcommittee with the shuttle that was proposed. So how would that work? And would it be like a free shuttle that would just pick people up from a specific spot on Solano? It's a great idea. Just want to hear more about that.
Mm-hmm. I think that it's very much in the concept area right now. I think, yeah, absolutely very low cost or free. Obviously electric. I kind of had the, on Solano Stroll Days, there's the that little cart that drives up and down Marin, which is an electric cart that holds about 8 people. I don't know if it's like that or if it needs to be bigger. I think we need to kind of get a little bit better estimates of how frequently it would run, how many people it need to hold, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's all good questions that we need to investigate and get nailed down.
Wonderful. Okay.
Another possible model, I don't know if you've seen Emory go round, but that goes around Emeryville, goes to the BART station that's near there. Just as a possible.
Yeah, I think theirs is funded. How is it funded again?
It's funded by their business community.
Yeah.
With the special business tax.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not city funded. Just something to look into and keep in mind.
Yeah.
That's good.
Any other questions?
Okay. We do have members of the public with their hand raised, so perhaps we'll go to public comment and then back to discussion.
Yeah, we can move on to public comment.
All right. If anyone else, any other members of the public would like to speak on the subcommittee updates, please raise your hand. We'll start with Nick Peterson.
Yeah, thank you very much. Boy, subcommittees is where a lot of action really happens, and I commend all of the committee members for stepping forward, and these are really challenging things. I want to give a special thank you to Mark Meglin for keeping the the point of sale aspect or the point of listing aspect alive and going. And I'm glad he got the material I provided. Again, there was a lot of time and effort in the past, and the materials I provided are only partially, because this was under study for for a couple of years before I even joined what was then the Sustainability Committee. So we did look at a lot of things, and one thing I want to reemphasize is that, again, I think it's appropriate at this point in the game and with the limited amount of time to really make actions that count, that just voluntary measures should be secondary to mandated measures. But the big caveat with that is that you need to be very mindful about how you phase in, and we only have a certain amount of time. So what I always was trying to push was that we would go to some sort of mandatory measures, but phase them in where they weren't too odious, and people who had objections would be able to have input on them, and you would have levers and mechanisms within them where you would ratchet up. You would start at lower amounts and ratchet it up. So I think there needs to, again, I encourage all the committee members, when they think about plans, if something just seems unpopular, all these things are going to be unpopular. You touch parking, it's unpopular. Albany has completely free parking everywhere now, and nobody wants that to change. And I hear people that have 5, 6, 7 vehicles parked on the street and just leave them there because it's free. So we really need to start addressing that and rewarding people for doing the right thing. And you need to start at some point and phase things in. So I really want to encourage people to think in terms of you're initiating a process, and it'll develop, from a sort of a nascent early on version and grow. But you have to get that process out there. That if you don't get the process out there, it's a form of kicking the can down the road. And we need to get some of these hard decision items out there and get them, the public involved and explain why they're happening. Thanks a lot.
Okay, our next public speaker is Jeremiah Pinguelo. Jeremiah?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I'm glad everybody was really talking a lot about the electric shuttle situation. I know for a fact, I don't know, a few months ago or last year sometime, I had mentioned that during when I was talking about certain things on Solano. It was the meeting when one of your presenters, or maybe it's the Spark person, mentioned something about shade on Solano, like shade canopies for like the benches. I don't know if you guys remember that. But anywho, I'm trying to stick to the subject here, but it was that same meeting. So the electric shuttle, that's such a great idea. I mean, sure, people could walk from Solano to El Cerrito Plaza for the BART, but such a great resource. I had always envisioned one of those electric things, the 8-seater. I think the model is like a GEM electric situation. But I know the Solano Avenue Association, they have a great connection with a wholesaler who sells those, because the Solano Avenue Association, they drive one up and down Solano. Oh, it's the same one that Sid drives. I think the one that Sid drives, that's parked at the library, or the community center rather, I think that was purchased through the same vendor. So I know Albany's already bought one of those little electric GEM vehicles. But I looked them up online. Yeah, you can get 8-seater, 12-seater, 16-seater. But if we install a charging station on Solano somewhere, or right there on Masonic, it can be charged. So I envision it going down, driving actually down the BART tracks. I don't know if that's what ended up happening, but I envision it driving down the BART trail, down the BART tracks, to El Cerrito Plaza, straight shot from Solano. So literally only have to cross 2 streets, maybe 3 streets, to get to El Cerrito Plaza. But I think that's a great idea. I hope that happens. I hope something fun like that happens that the city could see, the city could use, feel, touch, and enjoy for free. Thank you.
Okay, there are no other members of the public with their hand raised.
Okay, I believe we can move on to discussion of the subcommittee updates. If there's any comments anyone would like to make?
Well, I think for the zero energy, there was a comment, we could, maybe if we put the slide back up with the priorities, it would be great to get some feedback from the committee while we're discussing, and see if you, have any thoughts about the priorities or other items.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So many tabs. Okay, here we go. And I think the way it's organized later in the presentation is the top three, you organize them already by order of importance here, right?
Yep.
And 4, 5, and 6 are on your parking lot list currently. Okay.
And there's, the detailed slides was just, like I said, sort of brainstorming. It wasn't, those weren't prioritized necessarily, but these are the priorities that we came up with.
I just had a question. Could you explain why the school vehicles is like kind of lower priority, or?
I think we discussed it and we kind of went around to, it'd be highly visible and it'd be a great demographic to, show that we're interested in investing in electric vehicles, but there are not that many vehicles that are school vehicles. I think there's a few vans. There's no school buses in Albany, so, the return on the, energy might be a little low, but it's certainly something that we wanted to keep on the list.
I also just think it's a good reminder that we don't have jurisdiction over AUSD, so we can't tell them to do anything. We could have council recommend that they do something, but we ultimately couldn't make them change their vehicles.
I mean, yeah, I completely agree with I'm looking at these more and thinking about them. I think this is a great list. Just the other 4, 5, and 6 just seem like they're very complicated and, they're not really feasible. And the top 3 are both feasible and like priorities, especially after we saw with the presentation that a lot of it is coming from, vehicles and kind of piggybacking off of the idea of a shuttle, especially a lot of high schoolers at Albany High School are starting to drive. And just the turnoff from wanting to go to BART is it's so far. And I can't even talk going from my house to walk to BART. It's like 25 minutes and it's up a hill. So it's, definitely having some kind of easy, low-cost option for especially students in the district, middle school and high school who are starting to, transport themselves around. Love the top 3 priorities to focus on for next steps.
I just want to plug too, from the staff perspective, and we can definitely share this in an email, the funding issue with the public shuttle has been a barrier in the past. It costs millions and millions of dollars. So that's the issue with that one. So I would encourage you don't have to pull it off the table, of course, but I would encourage you to also look into other modes for facilitating use of public transportation, like how could we further increase micromobility or other modes in addition to exploring that option. I just don't want it to be one option that is a yes or no, depending on council funding decisions.
What is the city's relationship with AC Transit? Like, is that an avenue we could leverage to see if they would consider altering routes to include something like that?
I think we could definitely ask our transportation sustainability manager, who is the main, what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say collaborator, liaison with AC Transit, and see what the options are there and if they have opportunities for that. Because it's definitely the funding issue for a small city. It's a huge percentage of our budget, and that's just where issues have come up in the past. We would love to have a free shuttle, but I would love a free shuttle that picks me up every morning. How do we get the tech style here? But
Yeah, and I think, again, the Transportation Commission probably has thought about this a lot before, and so we want to work with them. And it seems to me that the business community in Albany could be an advocate for this, because, being able to transport yourself to a business and then buy stuff and then get your goods home, this would be a way to facilitate that. It's an obstacle for public transportation. So anyway, I think there's lots to, investigate.
it might be worth, if anyone's interested, reaching out to a commissioner, committee member, or council member from Emeryville to ask what that looks like politically in their city.
That's a good idea.
Potentially a follow-up task.
The one thing I don't think I mentioned during the talk was one theme we kept on coming back to was how to get people to, there's like, this is, public transportation and encouraging use of EVs, but how to get more people to invest in EVs, convert from gas to EVs. That's the people who are just on the fence to nudge them over. That was a discussion that we had, and parking management has been an idea that's been around for a while, but like Nick said in the public comments, and we all know it's problematic and it will take some time to get that implemented. But that's why it's number 4, because we don't want to move it too far down. We would like to keep that on the list, but we know it's problematic. But any ideas on how to get people, incentivize people to invest in converting their next car to an EV would be welcome to our committee.
Yeah. I wonder what opportunities there are for community level conversations about, I know that there are still people who are range anxiety, scared about charging, those kinds of things. And so I know a lot of cities have had success with bringing together folks who have EVs and letting folks who are EV curious look inside their vehicle, drive your neighbor around the block. Opportunities for that, I think, go a long way. And we know that there's so much funding coming down. I know just yesterday I read an article, though, that the funding stuff is a little bit confusing right now of what EVs qualify. But there is a lot of funding out there for electric vehicles, and the costs, all car costs are high right now, but hopefully will start to come down, and it would be great if we can, like what you said, convince people who are on the margin, this is the next move. I think about it a lot when we're talking about electrification and not leaving individuals stranded on old gas lines. It's also not leaving individuals stranded with new gas cars when others are transitioning, decreasing the demand for gasoline, which is likely to further skyrocket gas prices.
I think people who are on the fence about EVs, their main thing is that they just don't know enough, and there's not enough exposure on that topic. And actually just today, people were talking about EVs and how they didn't know if they wanted to do it because there weren't enough charging stations and stuff like that. And what they wanted was just more exposure from the city and everything, and just get more educated on that. So that would be a good idea, I guess.
Yeah. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Michelle and I have been chatting about doing more testimonial type outreach where we're talking about it for the heat pump program, getting people who got a heat pump and love it to write in to us so that we can include a blurb in the e-news or on social media and say, I love it, it's great, rather than it quietly happening behind the scenes. So if any of you personally would like to volunteer, you can email us, or if you know anyone who is super pro EV or heat pump or induction stove, let us know, because we would love to try to make it more of a community level. I think one thing we ran into this a lot with community climate solutions and the Carbon Free Albany is when the government tells someone to do something, they kind of shut down. They don't really care. But if their neighbor or their friend or their family member tells them to do something, it's like, oh, I trust this person. I know who they are. They don't email me with a city seal. And I think that goes a long way. So we're trying to come up with ideas for that if that's at all something a subcommittee or individual wants to chat with us more about.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think we can definitely prioritize, education and outreach opportunities as part of, most of these priorities. And given that there's so much federal funding that's coming in, as commenters like Lucinda mentioned, Albany can make, additional incentives that can help with the nudge. But given that there's already so much money coming in, it seems like a big role can be, public outreach, working with partners to really kind of help people wade through all these new incentives coming. Because, they can be quite, confusing, rules changing. So the more we can help just solidify, I think it'll go a long way.
Well, it sounds to me like the committee is having a lot of discussion around this number one priority. I don't know if you all want to focus on one of the priorities listed up here and then come next month with more of a, I don't know exactly what it would look like, up to you. But picking one and then diving deep on one for the next month or two.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I think from our most recent conversation, 1 and 2 were sort of our thoughts, but you're probably right. They focus and do something rather than try to do everything.
Well, I think you mentioned it earlier. It worked well with the multifamily EV charger pilot program where it was pick one and dive deep rather than kind of come up with ideas for a bunch. Because ultimately, this committee can't take any action on its own. We have to come up with a proposal and take it to city council.
So given that, do you think, and the need for talking to the Transportation Commission, do you think that, are you going to communicate with us about how we should do that, or should I just reach out to them directly?
You're welcome to reach out. If you bring in a member of the Transportation Committee to your subcommittee, I think that might be a Brown Act violation, but individuals, I don't want to give you false information. I will follow up on that question.
Ideally, our subcommittee would meet with their subcommittee.
Right. It's just that I think that becomes a Brown Act meeting. So we have to publicly notice it. And if you look at our city calendar, evenings for Brown Act meetings are pretty booked. So we have to use them sparingly. So we need to think through how to use them effectively, like when's the right time to do it and what kind of communication can we do in between so we're not having a bunch of Brown Act notice meetings and trying to find space on the calendar and asking our IT staff to be here late a lot of nights.
Do you think you'll be able to give us some guidance on how to coordinate with them within this next cycle between meetings?
Yeah, I can check in with our city clerk this week.
Okay. Because I think that we could go forward with one to a certain extent. It may be that we get to a point where it's like, okay, we made the proposal and now it's in the works and we move on to number 2. So one may not come to fruition, but we can move on to number 2 and such.
Great.
Thanks for the feedback.
Okay.
All right. If there's no other discussion, I think we can move on to the second item, 6-2.
Yes. Okay, I'm just going to provide a brief verbal staff report. As you saw earlier in the meeting, annually staff present KPIs and analysis of KPI trends to the Climate Action Committee in the spring. Senate Bill 511 by Senator Catherine Blakespear would direct the California Air Resources Board, CARB, to conduct greenhouse gas, GHG, emissions inventories on behalf of California local governments. This would be a statewide initiative. Each year, city staff spend approximately 20 to 24 hours over the course of 2 to 3 months collecting data from over 15 different sources and entities to prepare an analysis of the CAP key performance indicators, as well as updating the CAP actions tracking spreadsheet. So I just wanted to provide this as background that it takes quite a bit of staff time. If SB 511 were to pass, significant staff time and resources could be saved and could be allocated instead to implementation of CAP actions rather than to tracking the GHG trends from implementation. We would still likely do Albany-specific analysis, but we would probably cut that time at least in half, I would guess. Not only would SB 511 save time and resources, it would also ensure consistency of GHG emissions inventories across the state and show statewide trends in successes and needs in climate action. So we could learn a lot from our peers throughout the state. The SB 511 Letter of Support was developed by Civic Well and also the County of Contra Costa, and it calls on CARB to develop GHG inventory program that engages local governments and stakeholders, provides local governments the flexibility to further expand their inventories, so to do additional analysis, update the state's climate action portal map, and leverage existing tools to increase innovation and efficiency of climate action implementation and also tracking. If the CAC were to recommend that the City Council sign on to the SB 511 Letter of Support, staff will bring the item and recommendation before Council, likely during a May City Council meeting. Our staff recommendation tonight was that the CAC recommend that the City Council sign the Letter of Support for SB 511, but it's ultimately up to the committee what you would like to do. And to provide some more context, from what I've heard, there are still a couple months, at least 2 lead time until this decision is made. So just some context setting. I don't think it's it's going to happen next week decision. So I'll leave it there if there are any questions.
Are other cities doing this as well? I mean, are you aware of other cities taking similar action, city councils?
Yes, if I could pull up the letter. Our seal is on it already, and I'm not sure why, but just off the top, I see Alameda, Berkeley, Burlingame. I would say there's probably at least 50 cities on here and some private organizations.
Thank you.
As well. I could share my screen real quick to show you. This is just the page 1. So I see some counties, cities, and then down here we see some more like nonprofits, JPAs, and private entities possibly. So yes, we wouldn't be the only ones.
I have comments. I don't know if is this a good time for that?
We should wait until after public comment.
Okay.
You look like you have a question.
Yeah, I guess are there any identified downsides you all see to this bill passing in terms of either, I guess, ability for us to weigh in on methodologies or any use of resources?
We didn't do a deep enough analysis, to be totally candid, of what potential downfalls might be. I do believe a member of your committee tonight might bring up a couple comments for you all to consider, but staff ourselves, we didn't come up with any downsides.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is that this wouldn't stop us from doing our own inventory if we still wanted to. If there's some reason we disagreed with the state methodology, just ignore it. So I think that's like the biggest potential downside is if we had to use their inventory or something, but that's not the case with this. But yeah, I'll leave it to other committee members if they have thoughts on that.
a couple questions. Maybe I missed it. Who gathers the data? Is it a state agency? Is it a private company?
It would be the California Air Resources Board pulling the data from public and private sources,
Okay,
similar to what Michelle did.
okay, that was my next question. And is it sort of the same granularity of data? Like, like you said, if we want to get Albany specific, we probably would still need to do Albany specific ourselves. But is the granularity of data that you were showing, would it be comparable? Like,
So, under this bill, we would be getting like a city of Albany number. So it should get like city specific, and I would imagine would have like, emissions by source probably. At this point, the bill doesn't go into a ton of detail about what exactly it would look like, and how specific it would be. And there are some pieces of my report that got like really into the details on some of the things I know that are priorities for us and our KPIs rather than just the emissions inventory. And again, I'd be able to continue looking into some of those more specific and detailed things, regardless of whether this state report did that. But my guess is that it would look similar to the overall emissions by source inventory that I showed at the beginning.
okay. And do you think it'll be comparable to the historic data that you already have, or are they going to provide some historic data somehow so we can continue to see 5-10-year trends?
I don't think we know yet. I think this bill is just proposing that they would take this on in concept. And I know the letter of support called on KALB to work with local governments to determine methodology if the bill passed. So I don't think the details are clear yet. Other questions?
I had a question on how long, if we do pass this, how long the CARB would take to, I guess, start working with everybody and giving out reports.
Right. So if the CAC recommended this to council, we'd take it to council, they'd sign on to the support letter. I don't think there's a clear schedule yet of when that bill is up for a vote. So the short answer is I have no idea. We don't know if it'll pass or not, and if it does pass, I imagine a year or two, maybe 3. So I would guess a couple years out, but that's even if and when the bill is passed. They didn't include that in the School of Rock when a bill becomes a law, how long it takes.
It was a long song.
It was a long song, but they didn't talk about how many years it takes for something to take effect.
Any other questions? Okay, I believe we can move on to public comment.
Yes. We do have a member of the public with their hand raised. Nick Peterson?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate staff bringing this forward, and I encourage the committee to approve this and submit it to the council to add their support of this bill. I mean, basically, I think this is a no-lose situation, because unless there are concerns that this will divert state funding from something else, this is an issue that really addresses all of us in California, and I'm sure there are other municipalities that aren't as resource rich. And we're pretty constrained, but yet we do have Michelle Klaus and Lizzie, and they're putting this together, spending a lot of time doing it. But there are cities that can't even do this much now, so this would help them. We can use it. It sounds like the way it was presented, Albany can use this data. It will be, if not the same, somewhat close. And if we still want to pull additional data or collect it together in different ways, we still have the opportunity to do it. It doesn't prohibit us from doing that. So it's not like we're really giving anything up. We can still do what we want. So I think any kind of state resource like that that's going to help us is worth supporting. The only question I would have is, would this somehow solve the inability we face now of getting commercial data for Albany? would, at such a high level of state authorization, do you think that would allow us at least now to start seeing commercial emissions? Thank you very much.
Okay, our next speaker is Lucinda Young.
Yes, I just don't see any negative to this at all, and I think just encourage our committee to submit this to City Council. Given the shortage of resources in our city, I just don't see any downside to this, and I would encourage us to just go with this and move on to all the other matters that that need attention. Thank you.
Okay, there are no other speakers with their hands raised.
I believe we can move on to discussion of this item.
Chair, would you like me to respond to the question we got from the public?
Yeah.
Regarding the commercial electricity and gas data, asking if this would make that available. I don't know, but my guess is probably not. The data sharing rules are state laws. So I'm guessing that a state level inventory wouldn't help that. If it does get down to the city level, it would probably just say that it's missing, but I don't know for that for sure. So there's always a possibility that there's some legal thing I don't understand.
Any comments or anything?
First off, this bill is what's called a two-year bill in Sacramento, so if it's not acted upon this year, it'll be automatically introduced in January next year. Let's see. The other thing that is, I found out that SB511 was due for a hearing earlier today by the Senate Committee on Environmental Quality. Obviously, I don't know what happened in that hearing. But before that, staff posted an analysis for that committee. And it's, I would say it's kind of mildly negative. So let me read a little bit from it, and then I'll provide a link so that you can send it around to the people. Let me get here. Okay. This is a report from Teresa Keats, whoever she is, to the chair of the Senate Committee on Environmental Quality. And let me go down, not too far. She has a section in here that's entitled Describing the Problem versus Beginning to Solve It. The bill's supporters contend that some cities and counties lack the resources or expertise to make their own GHG emission inventories, and that CARB could help. However, it is unclear whether such cities and counties would actually take any action about being provided with a GHG emission inventory. No part of this bill obligates any local government to take action based on the GHG emission inventories they receive. And here we go. Given limited state resources and no time to waste on climate action, encouraging local jurisdictions to implement policies to reduce common sources of emissions that local governments have influence over would be perhaps a more impactful means towards reaching the state's climate goals. Mitigating some of the most common emissions, such as the top local strategies identified by CARB already, like reducing vehicle miles traveled, could have more immediate benefits both for statewide climate change mitigation and providing local co-benefits. Given the limited resources available to fund climate mitigation, the Senate committee may wish to amend the bill to direct CARB to prepare local emission inventories only for a city or county that requests it. And that last part that I read is actually in bold in this report. Let's see. So this makes me hesitate a little bit. I'm also unclear about how the Air Resources Board would implement this. One way to do this would be kind of the maximal approach, which would be really wonderful. They set up a really big, detailed database. They get the data from PG&E, et cetera, et cetera. They do almost all of the legwork that Michelle has been doing. That would be wonderful. The other extreme is they just kick it back to staff. Just say, here is a template, here's a form, an electronic form, Albany city staff and every other city, you fill in all the data, send it back to us, and we'll put it in our computer model. I have no idea which of those it would tend towards. There's nothing in this legislation that directs them one way or the other. So I'd sure like to see a CARB position on this before deciding whether to support this, because if they're really gung-ho on it, then it would save Michelle work, and I think it would be a great idea. And if they're not gung-ho on it, then I'm not sure it's such a good idea. Maybe this would just be a diversion for cities and counties that don't really want to do anything anyway. That's my comment. Thank you.
I'd like to say there are only 5 minutes till the meeting ends, so if anybody would like to make a motion to extend the meeting, I believe that would be good.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Till what time?
9:15?
Okay. Committee Member Fasoon?
Yes.
Committee Member Hodges?
Yes.
Committee Member Larson?
Yes.
Committee Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Committee Member Melgen?
Yes.
Chair Mohammed?
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries. You have till 9:15.
We can also continue discussion now.
Are you finished with your comments? I just wanted to make sure I wasn't interrupting. I thought that was I appreciate hearing those arguments. I always like to read the pros and cons of a bill if I can, but I didn't find it compelling for me. I still think that if this provides value to Michelle and Elizabeth and other people in Albany, that there's value to having that being done. I understand that there's a suggestion in the policy document to having it by request only. But I could envision in a scenario where there are people in a city who want that access to that information and the city might not be willing to request it. It might set up a little information fight that I don't feel like that Albany should be involved in weighing in on. I feel like there's a benefit for that type of information to just be provided. Once you get the systems up and running, I find that it's usually a little bit more plug and play. It's probably some economy of scale of just providing everyone the report. So I thought it was interesting, but it didn't compel me to feel that we shouldn't support this bill.
Go ahead.
Let's see, I can't quite remember what I was going to say.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I would agree with Committee Member Lieberman's position on the gathering the data part, and then the other part of the comment was, I don't see that this would prohibit anybody from doing any implementation. I mean, I think there's two separate things. And so, getting data, we all know being able to see what's happening and be able to track progress is important, and every city in the state should be doing that, needs to do that in order to make progress, and it doesn't in any way inhibit actual implementation of things. I mean, this isn't costing the cities anything. So I also am not swayed by the counter argument myself. So I'm in support.
And I think one piece I would like to be a bit clear, and perhaps this can happen as the bill moves on, but that I guess that the underlying data as well would be shared with the cities and not just, say a graph of emissions by sector. That might be harder for them to act upon. But if they were given all that data, that might enable some really helpful action. So yeah, I'm still supportive, and it seems like this But yeah, there are details to figure out, but that's something that can be figured out as this bill moves along and moves through the implementation process too, because it sounds like it'll move through, a regulatory process too, which will involve quite a bit of public comment at KALB.
Okay, if there are no other comments, I believe we can make a motion.
I'll go ahead and jump out and make a motion that the committee formally, to propose this to council that we support this bill? Is that what the
I
resolution?
think it's recommend that city council sign on to the letter of support.
Sign the letter of support, yeah. So, yeah, I agree with the recommendation. Recommend that city council sign the letter of support for SB 511.
I'll second that.
Okay. We'll do a roll call vote. Committee Member Fasoon?
Yes.
Committee Member Hodges?
Yes.
Committee Member Larson?
Yes.
Committee Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Committee Member Melgen?
Can I abstain? I wish we
Yeah.
could wait a month.
You can abstain. Okay, and Chair Mohammed?
Yes.
Okay. The motion does carry. And I encourage you all know that you're welcome to join the city council meeting. We can let you know when it's coming and make public comment as individuals, but not as members of the CAC, because we're not allowed to do that for Brown Act reasons, as you all learned in the training. So you're more than welcome to share your support or concerns. I think both are great for the city council. Okay.
I guess we can move on to the future agenda items. So are there any requests for future agenda items?
I was talking with a friend of mine and wanted to bring back an old item. Not that the pandemic is over, but it's, things are lifting. So I wanted to bring back the plastic containers and bags in Albany question. There's lots of plastic containers, takeout items, plastic bags in grocery stores. In fact, I went to Safeway to try to get paper bags for an auction that I was doing. And they said they don't even have paper bags, they only have plastic. I'm like, wow. So anyway, can we get an update on where the city is on plastic bags and containers and businesses and what they're doing with that?
Yes. You read our minds. We're hoping to bring something next month or the month after.
Okay,
so,
great.
and that'll be more of a conversation of, we can definitely include the bags and containers, but it'll be specifically a discussion about reusable, disposable foodware, because there's a lot going on right now with that, but we can definitely include bags in that discussion as well.
Any other requests?
I have a question. The issue of the street tree plan came up, and I imagine that's on a future agenda to talk about that plan.
Yes, so the street tree management plan is in progress. The Parks, Rec, and Open Space Commission is going to be the commission that oversees the whole project, but other commissions, because we know all commissions and committees are interested in this, we'll be bringing periodic updates to other commissions and committees. You're always welcome to attend PROS commissions meetings as individuals. And there will be lots of opportunity for public comment. I know Natasha envisions having a community listening session too, which you're welcome to attend. We'll of course let you know well in advance. It's early in the process of developing the street tree management plan. We right now have the RFP out, so we haven't even chosen consultants to help us, but that was a long answer to say yes, the STMP will be on future CAC agendas when there are substantial updates to bring and opportunities for comment.
Okay. Sort of following on that, there was a public comment about the tree removal. And so I didn't know, my question was sort of like, could we combine that with learning the answers to a couple of questions that were raised. The point was made that there's an acceleration of street tree removal, and I don't know that, whether that is true or not. There was the, Mr. Frank observed what had happened in his neighborhood, and I know that can be alarming, but I don't know if that means that there was an acceleration or that it just was an isolated incident, but I'd be curious if there's a tracking of the removal of street trees, how many, like, is there an acceleration or is there not? And then also, why were the trees removed? It looked in the photos like maybe they were dislodging some of the pavement, which can create an ADA problem. Like, there are good reasons to remove a street tree. One of them was like all up in the electrical distribution system. Maybe PG&E was doing it as part of or requiring it as part of a tree management, you know. There are always good reasons to remove the trees. We also don't want to remove them willy-nilly. So any insight that you could share at a future meeting about that I'd be interested.
Yeah, we can try. I know that, so street tree removals, it's under the purview of the pros. So we could potentially provide an update to this committee, but I know that the street tree inventory that is nearing completion right now, there will be a summary report provided to the pros. And I think that would be a great opportunity for you all, if you're interested, to attend that meeting and listen in and gain insight into that, to avoid duplicating efforts and inviting consultants and paying them for multiple meetings. We try to just stick with having one committee receive a substantial report from a consultant, but that will be coming to the pros probably within the next couple months, and I think that'll provide insight into those questions, because the inventory will obviously note what we have. And I think that's a good commission to ask, about street tree removals. Because, shocker, we don't really do any. We do planning for street trees, but we don't do removals, maintenance, any policy around it. So we can't really speak to any of the street tree maintenance questions. But if you were to attend one of the pros commission meetings, that would be a great spot to ask the staff that are there, and also the commission members who probably have more information.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other?
I have an agenda item also. I'm going to miss the May meeting, and let me get this going again. For the June meeting, I have a presentation regarding PUC rate-making choice that would help a whole lot on home electrification. For space heating in the presentation would make 2 points. For space heating in our climate, an electric heat pump is 4 to 6 times as efficient as a natural gas furnace, which is great. The greater efficiency is negated by cost. For the same amount of energy in our area, electricity costs about 6 times as much as natural gas. EBCE is not the problem. What we pay them is what I consider quite reasonable per kilowatt hour. On top of that, we pay what seems to me to be a really high rate per kilowatt hour to PG&E to provide revenue for activities like maintaining PG&E's wires, compensating wildfire victims, working to prevent future wildfires, hardening the grid, that sort of thing. So the PUC could spur installation of heat pumps by reducing PG&E's rate per kilowatt hour and maintaining PG&E's revenue stream by imposing a fixed cost, a fixed monthly cost. So that was what I was planning to present in June. And good news is that the PUC has already started this. I found an article on Monday that the PUC is considering restructuring PG&E's rates to drop the cost per kilowatt hour. And again, this is what on top of what we pay EBCE, but it would drop that wires charge quite substantially, and then it would impose a fixed monthly charge per household tied to the income of that household, so it addresses equity concerns. The big losers in it are people who have moderate incomes and don't use much electricity now, like people who have solar. The maximum rate would be, I believe, $92 per per month if your income is high enough. But anyway, so my plan now, subject to talking to the chair about it, is to go through in June and present how much a switch to a heat pump would save in a typical winter for a typical Albany home based on the different rate proposals that the PUC is considering. So that, again, I'm going to miss May, but that's what I would like to do in June.
We wanted to check and make sure that sounds of interest to the committee. I saw some nods.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And I mentioned a blog post. I'll send you a link to that. It was this Energy at House blog post from Monday, so I'll get that to you and you can send it around.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. We do have a member of the public with their hand raised.
I guess we can go on to public comment.
Okay. Nick Peterson?
Yeah, I had a couple thoughts on future things. It seems like because of the Brown Act, there's a kind of stymied communication between the Climate Action Committee, which kind of dips into various different activities that happen across different, not only committees and commissions, but departments, like Public Works and Police Department and other things. So I'm not sure if the COA has it, but maybe the Climate Action Committee should think about recommending to the City Council that they issue some sort of proclamation or statement that all city actions be made in consideration of the Climate Action Adaptation Plan goals. That, that includes tree removals, equipment purchases, vehicle purchases, and all that should really try to match with what those goals are. And of course, that puts more pressure on staff, I realize, to make sure that the metrics of what we're headed towards and that the plans of how those will be accomplished get more firmed up and in place, and then people will know sort of more what's going on. So that was one item, was just, some sort of city council mandate that happened. And then the other thing is I see that a lot of good ideas come up, and immediately people say, well, the city could never afford that. But yet we know there are massive amounts of money coming down the pipe from state and federal locations, and those all take a lot of time to process and understand and pursue. And it might be worth it to look into getting a new employee or someone whose full-time efforts would be locating, applying for, and making sure Albany is getting as much of those funds that are coming down. They're not going to just land in our laps. It's not like someone's going to come through town with a big truck full of dollars and shovel it out. You have to go after them, and a lot of these, you have to get participate in the preliminary planning for them. And there's a lot of technical support that you can get grants for too, that help you position yourself so that you're ready to submit for those grants. So that's a big task, and I can't see our current staff really doing that and continuing to work on the things that they currently are working on. So I don't know if there's a way to discuss that or bring that up or push it forward, but having some sort of efforts happening specific to grant acquisition and funding acquisition, it seems to be critical to us moving these projects along.
Okay, our next public speaker is Lucinda Young.
I have a couple of comments. First of all, I think the previous speaker's suggestion or some kind of a mandate or direction from our city council that all decisions made by our city, all actions should be in alignment with the goals in our climate action adaptation plan. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think that's a recurring problem. that I've seen in our city. Second, I really like Eric Larson's suggestion of some ordinance to deal with the huge problem of plastic waste in our city. Berkeley has some very, really some landmark foodware, takeout foodware ordinance that went into effect, I think, in 2020. Unfortunately, it is not widely enforced, but it is still, you know, they are making progress there, and I think that would be a great model to use. Berkeley has also, as of the beginning of this year, passed an ordinance prohibiting those awful plastic pre-checkout produce bags that are, you know, so prevalent. So I think Berkeley has done a lot of the work, and we may just be able to piggyback on the work that they have done to deal with this huge problem. I regularly do cleanup work at Albany Beach and various places in Albany, and the problem of plastic litter is huge. So I really liked that suggestion. Another suggestion is when the city is providing funding for events such as, you know, it gives a lot of funds to Solano's Stroll. There's an event this weekend that the city provided funding for. I would like to see some kind of sustainability strings attached to that funding. Some ideas, it's taking some steps to encourage active transportation. If vendors are used at events, to assure that they're using sustainable packaging in the products that they're selling. And I'm sure, you know, this committee may have other ideas, but I think some kind of sustainability string should be attached. Thank you.
Okay, we have one more member of the public. We are at 9:15, so we will need a motion to extend.
I'll make a motion to extend.
Okay, to what time?
10 minutes? Well,
Okay, so to 9:25? 9:20? Okay.
I think you said 10 minutes, right? Yeah,
Sorry, I was wrong.
9:25.
I was going to go for me too.
Committee Member Fasoon?
I have to go in like 2 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. We still have a quorum.
Okay.
I'm going to put you down as a, how do you want to vote for your peers? Okay.
Yes.
Leave. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I do have to call for folks listening. Committee Member Hodges?
Yes.
Committee Member Larson?
Yes.
Committee Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Committee Member Melgen?
yes.
Chair Mohammed?
Yes.
Okay, 9:25. We'll go to our next public comment. Jeremiah?
Yeah, just real quick, I won't take too long, but I definitely agree with everything going on with the plastic. You know, plastic is such a big thing right now. I was just wondering whatever happened to the plastic straw ban. You know, I was actually door dashing and I went to McDonald's to pick up a dash, and I asked for some water. They want to charge me 25 cents for a cup, and it wasn't even a plastic cup. So, you know, the city of Berkeley, you know, charges 25 cents, you know, just for a cup for some tax. So I was wondering, you know, why doesn't Albany have some sort of tax per cup thing, or plastic straw ban, or, you know, to-go-ware regarding plastic. Even at Safeway, you know, still using plastic bags. I thought there was supposed to be a ban on plastic bags. I remember last year there was only paper bags, and they weren't even allowed to have plastic inside the stores. So did everybody forget about the ban on plastic bags? And did everybody forget about, you know, the plastic straws? So I mean, and there's paper straws. I saw a grocery outlet the other day. You can get like 5,000 paper straws for $10. So there's alternatives to all this plastic. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, there are no other members of the public with their hand raised.
I think we can go ahead and adjourn. Okay. So our next meeting will be May 17th. So, yeah.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.